organizers, dear participants, and I must disappoint Professor Sofuoglu. It's me, Robert Langer, not Professor Motika, who is not able to join us. Benim Türkçe'de var ama İngilizce konuşacağım şu anda. So, dear organizers and participants, it is my pleasure to deliver a word of greeting and my sincere thanks for organizing this rich and important conference. This short speech will not be a keynote lecture for which Professor Motika was assigned, but cannot participate because of health reasons. So also on behalf of the organizers, I wish him a quick improvement of his health. But as a long-time collaborator, former research assistant and student of his, I was asked by Doan Bermek to relate to Professor Motika's work, which I will gladly do. You might not find it inconvenient after such a long conference, however, not to have to listen to another long lecture, so I will keep it with a brief amount of concluding words. It should be obvious that both Professor Motika as well as myself would have loved to cooperate in this event, also institutionally. However, his directorate of the Orient Institute Istanbul ended in September last year, whereas I have been on leave from the institute since May last year for deputy professorship at Munich. As was mentioned, Professor Motika is back as the chair of Turkish Studies and Turkology in Hamburg University. Of course, I cannot really substitute Professor Motika with his energy, broad knowledge, and wit, but I can relate to him and his work by referring to my own research, which was influenced and always supported by him. During a long way of cooperation, we also conducted research together, which also relates to the conference topic, of course. During this conference, we heard of narratives of real or alleged conversions, of forceful or more mild forms of converting places of worship from one faith to another, from antiquity up to present times, and statistically even more relevant, of profanization of religious places. There was a strong focus on Byzantine contexts, most importantly, the most recent example of Hagia Sophia, which we heard just about. The Byzantine church that became a mosque in the 15th century, a museum in the 1930s, and a mosque again in 2020. But we have also heard of examples of Latin churches becoming mosques or even spaces of profane usage, libraries, but also of other churches being converted into cultural spaces, storehouses, workshops, stables, or even prisons. Most regrettable are cases when sacred and heritage structures become abandoned and eventually destroyed. We also heard of the closure of the tekkes and zawiyas of Muslim orders, the historical forceful takeover of dergahs from one Muslim order by another. Likewise, the reuse of Christian churches by other congregations than those that initially built them, which at least catered for a continuation of religious space within urban or rural contexts. We have also heard of examples of places being used subsequently by different religious traditions over millennia, such as Doliche or Dülik Baba or places in Urfa, both in southeastern Anatolia. Also considering connected legal processes and conflicts, it became clear that conversion of religious places is related to unequal power relations and therefore also to subjugation, marginalization, humiliation, discrimination, and consequently also to suffering and violence. However, we also saw that conversion or reappropriation could guarantee the continuation of public religious spaces, like, as I said, at Dülik or Doliche, for example. Coming to my own research in relation to the conference topic, it starts with my doctoral research in Iran on the contemporary Zoroastrian shrines in Iran. These shrines partly emerged from agricultural cult places, which in pre-modern times were used by both Zoroastrians and Muslims. The latter often were recent converts to Islam, admittedly, being later converted into exclusively Muslim shrines or into exclusively Zoroastrian community centers. So one aspect I want to stress here is that conversion can also mean to reduce ambiguity in favor of clear-cut boundaries, when a shared use of religious places becomes impossible in light of modern clear-cut identities. We can observe the same processes in modern India with formerly shared Hindu-Muslim spaces. And I was very much inspired by research by Professor Motika, especially on Iranian contexts. The research I started together with Professor Motika, which was and still is one of my and his research foci, was on the Alevi tradition and its practices and rituals. We have heard of the conversion of and closing of Bektashi and Alevi places in Anatolia. We have also heard of the emergence of new Alevi places in urban contexts, the Jemevis. Even the conversion of old Bektashi places into modern Alevi centers, or of general holy places with saintly tombs into Jemevis. As we have observed in the German diaspora, just like Sunni or Shia mosques, Alevi Jemevis are established in formerly profane spaces, such as in abandoned industrial buildings. We can observe in the case of modern migration, the conversion of profane into religious spaces too. However, I would like to conclude with another development in the Alevi diaspora context in Germany, which is an example for peaceful and amicable conversion of religious spaces. To give a positive example too. With the demographic decline of smaller Christian communities, such as, for example, the Methodist Church or the New Apostolic Church in urban areas of Germany, such as the Ruhr area or Berlin, such communities sold their buildings to Alevi communities. This was facilitated by personal amicable contacts, sometimes established in interreligious meeting circles, but also by the fact that these Christian churches of Methodist or New Apostolic branches often do not feature prominent elements of the church architecture of the larger Christian branches. For example, they usually do not have a bell tower, and in terms of space design are constructed more like profane assembly halls. Although such conversions were attacked in public discourses who were not aware of the specialities of Alevism, but perceived this as a Muslim takeover of churches, it must be remarked that the Methodists especially would not have given their building to a Sunni or Shia community to transform it into a mosque, but were aware of the distinctive features of and notions of an Alevi Jemevi. In more general terms, it was, I assume, also more acceptable to them that the religious use continues instead of a profanation, which occurs in a notable number of instances in Western Europe too, when abandoned churches are either demolished or converted into restaurants, bars, etc. So to conclude with a favorable outlook, besides forceful and humiliating conversions, we can find cases of amicable conversions in contemporary times, between minority communities at least. But also examples of pre-modern, ambiguous, mostly folk religious, shared religious spaces, such as the Zoroastrian Muslim shrines I mentioned in Iran, of which only one continues nowadays in a modern form, featuring symbols of both faiths. May that, I shall say, serve as a model for interreligious tolerance and sharing of public spaces, including religious ones. So thank you again for organizing this event, especially to Tuan Bey and to Vanessa Hannen, to all those participating, and for your attention. Thank you.
Motika, we likewise echo your words in hoping that he has a full recovery. And thank you also for your insightful keynote speech, in which you have summed up so beautifully the diversity, complexity, as well as the ever-changing processes and debates relating to conversion and transformation of places of worship in Anatolia. And we thank you for having accepted our invitation at such short notice. Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, and dear friends, we have come to the end of ADIB's two-day international conference on the conversion of spaces and places of worship. We thank you for your interest and valuable contributions. I wish to repeat my opening comments, which I gave at the beginning of our conference, by thanking the many individuals whose invaluable contributions and efforts made the realization of this conference possible. I begin by thanking our participants, our distinguished guests and panelists and discussants for having accepted our invitation to participate and for their varied and fascinating contributions, which have truly enriched this conference. Secondly, we would like to recognize the dedication and tireless efforts of the conference organizing committee, comprising of Doğan Bermek, Ishtar Gozaydin, Yuri Stoyanov, and the whole ADAB team, especially Sevan Ataoğlu, in the organization of this conference. We especially would like to recognize Dr. Yuri Stoyanov, who was unable, unfortunately, to join us. We wish to recognize his noteworthy contributions to our conference and for the many prominent academics whom he invited to participate. Thirdly, we would like to thank Kubaba Travel and Tourism Agency, especially Mert Kip, for the meticulous organization and their professionalism throughout the 2 days. We would also like to thank the members of IDEA Proje simultaneous translation team, Sungur Savran, Shule Girme, Seray Okan, Deniz Çebe, and Işıl Demirkin for their excellent simultaneous translations. I end by thanking our sponsors, the Netherlands Matra Human Rights Fund and the ECONIS European Union Programme for their support. Thank you for your attention, and I now leave the floor to Doğan Bermek.
Distinguished participants, very dear friends, we have come to the end of this very loaded conference in a very successful manner, and we owe this success to the contributions of many different people, including Kubaba, IDEA, and ETKİNİZ, and without the support of this inexhaustive list, we would not be able to achieve anything. And I would like to lastly also thank our keynote speaker. He kindly agreed to take on the responsibility of delivering the keynote speech on behalf of Raul Motika. I would also like to extend my gratitude to Cemal Kafadar for his extremely important contributions. I believe that this conference will be opening the gate for many other important researches. In Turkish, we say that, if you start once, then probably many other things will follow. That is was the meaning of this Turkish saying. And I believe that with this conference, we were able to talk about many different topics, and I'm sure that there will be many other debates, discussions to follow, and I'm sure that we will be able to properly undertake that responsibility. This conference, I think, first and most of all, taught us that this topic of convergence or conversions are not discussed openly. And also we were not able to decide initially whether we would call it with the Turkish word dönüştürme or some other Turkish word. And but I think it was a good discussion, and our next target is to discuss about the Balkans, and if we can do that, then there can be perhaps a third conference on a different geography. Now, with the courage that we have gained in this conference, I feel that we will have the chance to realize those two next conferences. Of course, we are a small and modest organization. We don't have plenty of human resources or any other kinds of resources. And under these limitations, if we could be successful, then I think we can continue. And I would like to once more thank all our colleagues for our contributions, all our friends. I'm really waiting for the days that we will have chances of coming together again in the future. Thank you so much.